And a warm welcome to those of you attending on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. This is a meeting of the Corporate Resources and Infrastructure Select Committee. My name is Councillor Adam Bennett. I am the Vice Chair of this committee and, for now at least, the Chair of tonight's meeting. A key role of this committee is to monitor the performance of local public services within its remit and to hold in-depth reviews on topics of resident interest. We engage with a range of external witnesses in our activity, which can include community groups, residents and subject matter experts. Where we identify areas for change or improvement, we make recommendations to the decision-making cabinet. You will find details of the business to be considered today are shown on the agenda, copies of which are accessible on the YouTube channel underneath the broadcast. Please note that members of the committee and witnesses may be using their laptops and tablets to view the agenda paperwork today. We are not expecting a fire drill, so if the fire alarm goes off, please follow officers to the fire exits and out of the building to the designated meeting points. For those in the room, please switch off or to silent any mobile devices now we've started the meeting. For those of you who are watching online, if you are so minded, you can complete one of our resident feedback forms. These can be found in the information section underneath the YouTube video. These forms are intended to help us improve the way that we run these meetings. Now we move on to the attendees of the meeting. I'll introduce everybody, that's probably easier. So we have Councillor Farhad Chubada, Darren Deeks, who's Head of Libraries and Cultural Services, Carlos Montesino, who is Operations and Resources Manager, Sophie Wilmot, Senior Transport Planner, Councillor Islam, Councillor Garg, Councillor Mand and Anisha Teji from Democratic Services. And a welcome to Councillor Mand on joining. This is your first meeting on this committee, so welcome. The agenda... I did say Councillor Islam as I was going round? Yes. Yeah.
Last meeting for Councillor Islam.
It is, sorry, yes, and you've moved up the table. Yeah, no. This is, yes, the first meeting for both of you. Welcome, welcome. So, agenda item 1 is apologies for absence. Anisha?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Banerjee and Councillor Riley will be joining the meeting shortly.
You get the proper chair shortly. Agenda item 2 is declarations of interest in matters coming before us this evening. Are there any declarations to be made? No. Agenda item 3 is to agree the minutes of the previous meeting, which was the 17th of June. I guess there's only 3 of us present that are able to agree those. Any amendments you wanted to make at all? No? Agreed. Thank you. And agenda item 4 is to confirm that the items of business tonight are all part 1, which means that they will be considered in public. So with that kind of the administration done, we move on to agenda item 5. And Sophie, which is the progress on the delivery of the Hillingdon cycle strategy.
Yep. So, as a quick summary, that we launched the cycle strategy only in September 2024. It was slightly later than planned, as we did have quite a bit of feedback that we wanted to get through in order to launch the final one. So we had a long consultation period where we received a number of responses, both from stakeholders such as the Canal River Trust, the London Assembly member, and we also had almost 200 individual responses from people across Hillingdon. So as part of that consultation, we asked if they supported the ambition statement set. 88% supported this. And we also asked whether they felt the implementation would make them consider cycling in Hillingdon more, and currently a total of 71% of respondents said it would. So what have we done so far? As I say, it's only been a few months since we've launched it, but we've been able to work a lot with Transport for London. We were asked to present at an event which brought together all cycle officers from all boroughs, because they were keen to demonstrate to other boroughs what outer London boroughs were doing. We welcomed Will Norman, the London Walking and Cycling Commissioner, to Hillingdon to meet with officers and the Cabinet Member for Planning, Housing and Growth. We continue our bikeabilities training. We have a new adult cycle training programme which we've launched at Pilteve Cycle Track. We continue our Dr. Bikes, in particular working with events such as the Reuse Recycle event that's held by the Waste team and which is becoming increasingly popular. We have provided one of our only parallel tiger crossings on Pilteith Road. This is to support a future cycle link that's going to go through Brunel University. We are working with TfL to develop 2 other crossings along the A312, which already has a significant cycle shared use path along there. But obviously there are some junctions that are difficult to navigate. These are at Bilton Way and Willow Tree Lane. These will be fully funded by TfL once they're approved. We continue our programme of upgrading the Grand Union Canal towpath. We've just completed Rockingham Road and Oxford Road. We're also looking at improving accesses onto the canal. At Packet Boat Lane, we've put in a cycle wheeling channel to help cyclists get down onto the towpath. Last financial year, we gave a total of 5 schools cycle parking grants to allow them to enhance and expand their scooter and cycle parking offerings. We've just provided new cycle parking in Ruislip Town Centre. And following a resident suggestion, we've put an advanced cycle stop line at a set of signals in Park Lane, Harefield. We're doing a lot of design work with TfL and in-house to look at further things and further focusing on junctions and routes, particularly through Brunel University. We're also working with our comms team about good communication strategy for cycling, making sure we benefit from things such as national events, Bike Week and things like this to make sure we can get the message out there. Due to the response of the cycle strategy, we're now looking at producing a walking and wheeling strategy to complement that. So in terms of some performance data, each year, because our majority of our funding comes from Transport for London, we have to report back in what they call Form C, with numbers of what we've achieved that year. In terms of a few of the headline figures in the table, in 23-24 we delivered no cycle and scooter parking at schools, whereas 24-25 we were able to deliver 25 new spaces. In 23-24 we trained 1,059 children at Bikeability Level 2, and 24-25 that went up to 1,103. We also have mode share data that's given to us yearly by Transport for London, which we will continue to review going forward. At the moment we haven't seen any change in our percentage of cycling, but the latest data for that is 23-24, so it's always a year behind, so it hasn't actually seen the effects of any of the improvements that we've made. So for this financial year, we currently have been awarded £451,000 from TfL just for cycle schemes, so that's going to allow us to be able to bring forward and develop a lot more of our ambitions in the cycle strategy going forward. And that's just a succinct summary, I hope.
All right, thank you. First of all, apologies for lateness. It's just taken me 2 hours to get from the other side of Watford to here. I mean, who is in charge of scrutinising transport? Oh, yeah, we are. So it's just been absolute nightmare traffic, and I'm very grateful to Councillor Bennett for standing in. Thank you for that. Just to start off by saying we're very keen on the cycling strategy, and we're very keen on progressing our cycling offer to residents. I think that one of the things that is most interesting is our utilisation of what we've already got. And this borough is pretty much crisscrossed with alleyways and walkways and green, I like to call them sort of green pathways, sort of great swathes of greenness that cross over various places. that can be utilised. And I think very much certainly the walkways and alleyways that we have, and that probably does them an injustice because by and large they're usually wider than the normal alleyway, let's say, would be suitable for both cycling and for walking, and sometimes maybe cutting some vegetation back and that sort of thing would make them even more accessible. So it wouldn't necessarily be a massive cost to get those sorts of things online. So what we're not so keen on, I think, because I don't think we have the room in most of our major roads in the borough, is a kind of white line about 7 foot away from the curb and call that the cycle lane. Generally speaking, they tend not to work very well. So I think the idea of being able to really utilise what we have at present, and someone once told me that if you planned it carefully, you could get from northward to Heathrow villages really without touching too many major roads, which is very encouraging. And I do remember during the pandemic that a lot of people would be out and about on their bicycles in either ones and twos or in families, which was great. So keen to understand how we're going to make better use of what we've got already, and also I think we need a kind of several-pronged attack, don't we? Because there's a piece to be done on education as well, big time. There's far too many people, I think, taking their kids to school in cars. I know the excuse is we're going to work, therefore we drop the kids off. But there's not at all, I don't think there's a great deal of younger people going to school, for example, on bikes or walking. And we do get a lot of difficulty with hotspots around schools, dropping off time, that sort of thing. So I think there's quite a bit of work to still be done on the educational side. And also the kind of promotion of the fun side. So I wonder if we have thought of having it's a similar sort of thing to park runs, although different. In other words, getting people together where they can go for a cycle or in a relatively defined area, like a park or something, but just getting and advertising it like an event. And having a series of cycling events throughout the year. Again, it's for promotion and attitude, and then we can start talking to people about, talking to the cyclists about how they deal with things, and talking to drivers who, I mean, they're all the same people really, but when we drive, we have one hat on, don't we? When we cycle, we have another hat on. When we're pedestrians, we have another hat on, and the three hats don't really work very well. So that's really just a sort of an overview, really to be encouraging if we can, and very, very supportive, but to be keen on cracking on with this, and because I think the intention is to up the percentage of cycle use dramatically in next 10 years or so, and there's still quite a bit of work to do, but I think we would like to see some positive plans for events and for educational things. We've got a good offer in terms of the cycling folk from the council who sort of set up stalls and things, and that people can go and talk to them about that sort of stuff. But one of the things I was wondering about is whether we couldn't talk to our cycle shops, and when we do have these events, or if we have any sort of event that involves cycles, let the cycle shops have a stall so that people can talk to them about maintenance and that sort of thing. So it's just a sort of few ideas backing up what you're doing, really. So, yes, Councillor Clark.
Sorry, just through you, Chair. I believe you do some cycling, like training and classes at schools already, do you not?
Yeah, so in terms of that, we do our bikeability programme, which is offered to every primary school year 6, and that is going from strength to strength. We have adult cycle training, which is currently at Pildheath Cycle Track, so it's a secure space. in terms, and obviously we do our doctor bikes where our guys can go out there and talk to people. I say they've been trying to get out at other events like the reuse, recycle, to get more, to catch people who wouldn't necessarily just be coming for a doctor bike. Pre-COVID, we did do bikes, what we called Bikespiration on tour, which is where we visited a few parks a couple of times. It was on the Civic Centre forecourt, and we had, say, other cycle shops there. We had some bikes to try and things like that, but that was all sort of done pre-COVID, and it's not something we've got back to yet, mainly due to resourcing and funding constraints. So maybe, as we move forward with this is something we could maybe try and reintroduce in some form to promote what we're doing and cycling in general.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask if cycling proficiency was still a thing, but bikeability sounds like the more modern word. That was like the best week of Year 6 for me, was you got to take your bike into school, you got a certificate, no uniform, high-vis. Good that is still continuing. And I just wanted to say, when we were reading the papers, looking through the pictures, I was one of those people who did get a bike. I don't have it anymore in the pandemic. And the Grand Union Canal was before, half really nicely paved, half sort of like a BMX track with stones and tree roots and everything, and it's like night and day. Looking at your pictures of the part that we've done, and then reading on the papers that in terms of the next step there's further improvement down near Hayes as well. I just wanted to ask you about the long lane, selfishly because part of it is in my ward, but that's the ideal geographical area where you've got quite a wide carriageway plus quite a very wide grass verge either side, on a north-south route which is very congested because of the A40. What's the timeline on that? And do you think, is there potential for more of these over the A40 type routes where no matter what you've got north or south, you kind of get to this bottleneck where there's either lots of traffic lights and traffic or a quite dangerous roundabout for a bike? Is how do we enable cycling to be easier across the main road?
Yeah, so in terms of long lane timeline, we're actually looking to get consultants on board to do a feasibility survey, because what we want with long lane, it's not just about the cycling element. We've got massive amount of buses going down there. There's large schools, and lots of people. So we're looking at what TfL term healthy streets. So it's looking at how we can improve it for buses, cycling, while still maintaining obviously car movements, because it is one of our only routes over the A40. So that's actually going to be done this financial year. So we'll have that initial study with the view of starting to implement things in the next 2 to 3 years along there, because it would be a bigger sort of flagship project, I suppose, as part of the cycle strategy. So that's all coming on board. We know that crossing the A40 is a major issue. Unfortunately, all of the junctions are TfL owned. We are working with TfL. They are looking at a project at the Polish Air Force Memorial of how to improve cycling over that, and we're working with them to try and do the other junctions as well. So currently we're sort of abutting up to it with what we're doing, but with a longer term view that with TfL's help we will do something to get them over that. There is a route next to Swakeleys, which is for cyclists and pedestrians, but it's not very well known or well used. So we're going to try and open that up and promote that as a route for people to use, rather than trying to tackle Swakeleys. Again, it's that sort of education and communication element of, we've actually already got it, here it is, come and use it. So that's, hopefully soon, and it's all in process.
I think Swakeleys would be a better option than Hillingdon Circus. I mean, one could imagine, and there is one much further down the A40 at after the gyratory. Is it after the gyratory? Yeah, after the gyratory, as you go towards the sort of Wilman Scrubs turning Acton. There's a sort of corkscrew bridge that you can go across there. But again, it's not the major junction. So Swakeleys is probably a better bet, because either it's a bridge or a tunnel at Hillingdon Circus, and either one of those two is going to be a massive cost. Whereas there are some routes already on Swakeleys, and as you say, I think it's more of a question of, you see, one of the ideas that I've heard discussed is having a sort of A to Z, maybe a digital one, but certainly a kind of A to Z of all the non-road pathways and alleyways. I need a better word than alleyways, but because they're bigger usually, that are really good interconnectors between housing streets and then shopping centres or whatever it is. And they're all numbered, and I think there must be somewhere a list of all of them, because having that knowledge and being able to plot a route where you only go on the main road for a very short period of time is I think would be a really good piece of work for us to do, and to have that available for residents. And the other thing we need to do is to separate out the needs of commuter cyclists and sort of pleasure or school cyclists, because obviously they've got different needs. They've probably got different types of bikes, and one of the things I keep hearing from residents who want to be commuter cyclists is that our offer for bike parking at the stations is not brilliant. And again, going around the country as I do for the LGA for various bits and pieces, you go to stations and you see these covered racks. They're almost like sort of totally enclosed almost. Very often they're two-tier. So again, I think we need to, if we have those at all of our stations or the car parks near to the stations, that will encourage people to cycle if they think they can leave their cycles there all day and come back and find them, as opposed to not, which isn't a good idea at all. So I think we need to look at that as well and see if there, and I reckon there must be some sort of funding from some organisation or another to help with those. And it may be that TfL, or it may be cycling charities or cycling and sports organisations may be able to help with that, because it promotes use.
Yeah, we have funding this year for cycle parking. We are proposing to look at Northwood Hills and Ruislip Garden stations, as they've been flagged as ones that need more or better cycle parking. So we'll be looking at those three this year, and then we can look at further programme of them going forward. But yeah, TfL have a dedicated ring-fence cycle parking pot that we have funding granted to us from.
Well, that's good, and obviously we need the right sort of secure parking at those stations. I would encourage you to look at all of the stations, really. I mean, Ruislip, for example, I don't just say because it's my ward, but I mean it's probably one of the busiest tube stations in the borough. But equally, the new Elizabeth line at Hayes will, I don't know if I can't remember if we put in cycle parking there, but that would be another ideal spot to put them in. But realistically, trying to put them in at all the stations, I think, would be a good idea, because again, I think it encourages people to use them, and certainly from what I've heard from residents, that if it was safe and secure, they would use it. But I think looking at it in those various different kind of prongs of the fork, if you like, to go at it. But in particular, I think there's a really good piece of work to be done on kind of the relationship between people when they're drivers and cyclists and walkers. If we do run these events, and they wouldn't necessarily need to cost very much. I mean, if we were to do comms and say, right, we're going to put on a kind of cycling awareness event in, I don't know, just plucking it out of the air, Ruislip Lido, which has got a circular walkway to it, and anyone can come along and just have a go, sort of thing. Bring your bike or whatever, and then we have some stalls and so forth, just to sort of get the whole thing moving again. Because I think there was quite a decent momentum in COVID, in the pandemic, and we kind of need to really catch up on that. And there is, as you say, money swilling around from various organisations that we can take advantage. But I think if we show that we are supportive of this and keen to move it on, then that will also help people as well. All right, any other, Councillor Mann?
Thank you, Chair. I think lots of very good points have been raised on this, and it's something that's very, very important. Obviously, the key words which Councillor Riley, you mentioned, were safety and security, and I work in a school but also live right next to the Minette cycle track, which is extremely popular with cyclists. But the thing we get with parents is they would love their kids to come to school by bike, but it's just the safety element of they're actually very, very worried in terms of the morning rush hour and the traffic. So we've got about £400,000 of funding here. I would concur with your statement in regards to parking at stations, but also increasing the safety of our current routes. In regards to finding a route, Google Maps does it really, really well. You can put a route in, and Google Maps will give you a cycle route. But just wanted to focus on the safety aspect, and if we could increase with some bollards in some areas where there's a lot of junctions, and to stop the cyclists having to go even on the footpath, which is dangerous for obviously the pedestrians, but also onto the main roads where, especially in the mornings, with children and traffic, that kind of rush hour. I do have a few questions though. One question is in regards to the training. We've got 58 adults received training. I mean, I could take that if you're an adult, you're obviously more likely to be already riding a bike. But does that have we addressed the barriers for, let's say, older residents or people with disabilities, etc.?
Yeah, so that we have now do our programme at Pilteef Cycle Tracks. I don't know if you know, it's a facility that we actually built in the grounds of Pilteef School. It's quite a large track, and it's got a zebra crossing and other road hazards, so it's a safe environment. And also at that base we have disability bikes, so we have a disability bike hub, so we've got some tandem bikes, we've got a wheelchair bike and all things like that people can come and use to try out in a safe environment, and we do some training on there. We can offer training on road as well, that's another point, but we've sort of tried to get people into a safe environment first to try it, get some confidence up before moving them out onto the road. And yes, we do have those disability bikes now to allow others to try out and come and use. Okay.
Another question, if you may, Chair. In regards to the infrastructure and the routes, it says on Table 1 we're not providing any sort of upgraded cycle routes. It says 0 kilometres on the table. Does that mean then we're practically on page 7 focusing on upgrades, parking, in terms of utilising this budget, funding budget from TfL? Because in regards to new cycle infrastructure, am I reading this correctly? New cycle infrastructure, I'm reading it's not a new lane, a cycling lane, but increasing an already existing, for example, like you mentioned, alleyways, etc., making them cycle friendly if they're wide enough. But at the moment it says 0.
So the previous 2 years, yes, it has been 0. This year we should be able to report more than that.
Okay.
What we've been focusing on because at TfL we have a cycle sponsor, so they're nominated by them, they look after 2 or 3 boroughs, and they work with us on best practice and things like this. What we've been doing is looking at junctions, like I say, we've provided that crossing on Pilteef Road, because a lot of the routes are there. You've got the A312, even the Hillingdon route, we've got those routes which are there, but the main barriers are trying to cross the roads or navigate a junction. So what we're doing is trying to upgrade the junctions first so they're safe, so that then they can connect the link much better that we've already got. So that's how it's going at the moment, is we're not getting the distance, but we are making the improvements. Once we have a couple of junctions in place, we can then upgrade the route in between, and that's when our kilometres will magically get really, really long, because actually it's already there. So that's sort of the approach we've taken, because it works best, and it means we're getting the best value for what the money we've got. And it just means that we've then got really safe, it helps that safety aspect, because a lot of people, when they're on the route, they're quite happy. Then they come to a junction and they're like, ugh, and that's when the safety issues arise. So we're trying to overcome them first to make the routes better for everyone.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So quick question just around scooters and e-scooters, and kind of changing in demographics, and scooters now seem to be much more popular with Gen Z, Gen Alpha than they sort of previous generations. Is when does our cycle strategy evolve to become a scooter cycle strategy, and how is the increase in the number of scooters challenging and hindering you in terms of making safe, dedicated space for cycles, but then potentially having something, a scooter whizzing down there?
It's a challenge. I mean, the cycle infrastructure can easily accommodate, so in terms of size and width, it can easily accommodate a scooter. So we're not building it to not be able to accommodate a scooter in the future. So that's not an issue that we need to be overcome. I think there is an antisocial aspect to scooter riding at the moment, especially e-scooters. A lot of our neighbouring boroughs have got e-bike and e-scooter trials, so we're sort of keeping an eye on them to understand how they're working, what issues they've been facing, before we look to introduce anything like that within our borough. I don't think we've seen as many as other London boroughs, but it will be a challenge, I think, just in terms of the antisocial and the behaviour side of it. So we have previously done a little briefing and campaign about riding them safely, don't ride them on footpaths and things like that. But I think if we get more and more, we will have to look into that as a matter to deal with.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you. Just a different question was just around TfL and the Commissioner's visit and work with other boroughs. How well are we performing versus other outer London boroughs in terms of our cycle strategy, and were they impressed?
Very impressed. As I said, so TfL organised what they called a cycle away day, and they asked 2 boroughs to present at that. We were one of them, because they were so impressed with what we've achieved and what we're proposing to achieve. So we presented there, and that's actually where Will Norman came up to me and said, I really want to come to your borough, meet everyone. And he came down, and everyone came away from the meeting very positive. He apparently uses some of our work as an example when he goes around talking to other boroughs. We've had other boroughs such as Haringey, sort of over the other side, come to us and say, can you help us? We want to do this, but we don't know where to start. So it's been very well received by TfL, and I think that's why they're quite keen to work with us and give us some of this money that's been there, because we haven't previously had much in terms of cycling. So yeah, it's been extremely well received by all.
All right, thank you. Councillor.
Sorry, it's my first meeting today, so I'm just trying to get my knowledge actually. Just got a question on page 8. If you looked at it on that, it's increase of number of rental bikes and scooter parking spaces provided through new dockless bays, and number of rental bikes and e-scooter parking space. What kind of benefit council gets when the sponsor give the sponsor to the renting to the sponsor companies, and what kind of standard safety standard they do provide? Because we can see that there's a lot of e-bikes is abundant everywhere in the borough.
Yeah, so we're currently not signed up to a scheme. Those bikes that we see scattered around the borough are actually from Ealing. So they are meant to be geo-fenced to not come into our borough, but there's obviously ways of getting around that. I mean, as we're not signed up to it, because there is still issues that other boroughs who have previously signed up to it are facing, in terms of, in particular, fly parking of the bikes. They've had to spend a lot of time and investment actually making parking bays for them, taking away parking. In terms of what benefit we get, I'd have to look into that, because I'm not sure there's much financial benefit for a borough to have them in there. I can make some inquiries about that, but at the moment, with what's going on with other London boroughs, I think the problems outweigh any benefits they're finding. So London councils who look after all the London boroughs are doing some studies and reports on what they call micro-mobility, which this is to see the pitfalls, how they can be overcome, and we're keeping a close eye on that to see about where our future lies in bringing this sort of thing into our borough. But we want to do it possibly when it's a little bit more advanced.
Sorry, Chair. Just follow-up question is that, sorry, as you said, you're going to look at it. Thank you for that. But what's saying this, in my ward, I mean West Brighton wards, in my ward it says on your table page, it says not recorded 2023, this space is rented to them, but still is my borough, in my ward there is a spaces for the rent to the sponsor company.
Yeah, so that is the Santander. Is that the Santander?
Santander,
yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
So that's a very unique little scheme.
Mm-hmm.
So that was awarded. That was something that came from Brunel University. They had a competition at the time. And they did some crowdfunding, and they had a little scheme that operates between Uxbridge, Brunel University, and West Drayton. Operates in West Drayton because Brunel found that a considerable amount of their students and staff came into West Drayton station and then were crowding the youth-free bus to get there, so we put some bikes in there. So that currently is controlled by Brunel. That's actually agreement's going to come to an end. So we're working with our procurement team and with Councillor Tuckwell as the Cabinet member to potentially take ownership of that scheme ourselves through a tendering process, and then allow us to potentially expand it as a dock scheme to overcome some of the issues. And that's still in its infancy, because at the moment we have no benefit from that scheme at all, because it's controlled by Brunel.
I think where these loan bikes work best are either places where there's a particular interest. So maybe a particular sort of, Cranwell Park maybe, or a particular sort of site that is easier if you have a bike to go around on. I mean, going around to other London boroughs, you just half the time are stepping over bikes and scooters that are just abandoned. I think we need to be very cautious, and I think you will be, in not going down that route. But individual little schemes, so commuting from a university to a station, good idea. Usage around a particular venue, probably a good idea if there was a way of somehow stopping them from leaving that area, but there probably isn't, because I've seen bikes from Croydon in Haringey and goodness knows where else. It's ridiculous. So we need to be careful about that, and somewhere along the line it costs either to reclaim them or for them to be abandoned like that. But I want to go back to something that Councillor Mann said about new routes as opposed to what we've already got and using what we've got. And you said the Celandine route, and you're right, but the Hillingdon Trail is a very long and it used to be a very well used thing. I mean, it's a bit carved up now because of HS2, and the main bit going from north to south has been cut off. But when that comes back, I mean, that would be a really good thing to base a very long stretch for cyclists to use and walkers to use. And I suppose we also need to think about another wheeled community, which are the people who use mobility scooters, which with increasingly quicker ones and larger ones. I mean, I saw one the other day on a pavement, looked like a small car. Nearly ran me down. Maybe it was deliberate, I don't know. But there's a whole batch of people who use that type of thing, and whether that they sort of come into this as well. And the other last thing that we need to think about are communities who don't traditionally cycle or use bikes. And I do remember a while back there was an event on the Grand Union Canal with all of our team from the borough doing various things, and I'm not sure if they were actually called this, but this is what I think someone told me. Asian Ladies Cycling Club from Hayes, and there was about 20 or 30 women who turned up, and it was great. And they were telling us that they've got this club themselves, and they've been going on for several years, and they're hoping to expand the membership. So getting to communities who perhaps don't, who traditionally haven't sort of taken to cycling is also quite a good route to go down as well. All right. Does anybody have any more questions? Yes, Councillor Carter.
Sorry, just one last thing, which I think we may have missed is there any plans for example, Uber drivers, like not just the cyclists and things, to look at the cycling lanes and things for them, because I feel like that's one area that we seem to have completely missed within the review, because there's quite a lot of them.
There is, and there is antisocial behaviour issues with those as well, which I know our Public Space Protection Order looks at. But I think you're right, and that is something we need to consider, because there is only going to get more and more of those. I think that's something we'll take away and think about.
All right, thank you. Well, look, we'll draw it to a close now, but I think you've got the drift from our sort of interest, and we really want to be supportive on this and back you up on it, and very much so, and also obviously Councillor Tuckwell as well with his role. But ultimately, and as soon as we can, the proof of this is being able to point at stuff, isn't it, and say, there it is, we're doing it, kind of thing. But I'm really very keen on this idea about opening up these existing routes that we've got and letting people know about them, and maybe it's a question of saying, well, have a look at the website or Google or whatever it is, but nevertheless having a focused resource that people can use for that. And the idea of these cycle parks, safe, secure cycle park, that's what I wanted to say. There's a scheme that I've seen, where was it? I think it was in Manchester somewhere, where they have cycle buses. So they have for children, going back to the safety issue that Councillor Mann raised. So you have a whole bunch of, a bit like walking buses, a whole bunch of kids going to school on bikes, but they all go together, or they all congregate at some certain point, and then they go to school, and they're accompanied by one or two, and you have a rota of parents. So that's something maybe to think about as well. So at least that would, it wouldn't cure the safety thing, but at least it means that you've got the safety in numbers to that extent, and it's more likely that drivers will take notice of a lot of people on bikes in a group, or children on bikes in a group, than they would individuals. All right, look, thank you very much. That's really, really helpful, and we'll hopefully see you soon so that we can get some updates.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much for that. That's really encouraging, I think, because stepping up on our cycling strategy is really good. Okay, item 6. We can take this relatively quickly, I think, in some ways. We've been, just for the benefit of our new members, and I know they've been welcomed already, but I'm very pleased to see both of you. Very pleased to see Councillor Garg as well, but she's been here before quite a lot. So one of our major review items for this term has been discussed at some length, but essentially what it is to identify the extent and type of properties, not domestic housing, but domestic properties that aren't blocks of offices, but other properties that the council owns that have the capacity to bring in income. So halls, rooms in libraries, just to sort of pluck an item out of the air, and any sort of property, because pretty much as far as we can tell, we don't know everything that we've got. We know some of the stuff we've got, but we don't know everything. And it may be that some of the property that we don't know about, or at least that we're not very well sighted on, is either in such a state that it really shouldn't be repaired and can't be put back together again, so it should be sold and capitalised in that sense, or it's property which could be brought up to scratch or brought up to a decent standard and then used as an income stream, or it's property that is already very, very good and is making money, but it could be making more. So it's a commercial look at our properties that can be hired, rented, or long-term leased, which are not big office blocks and are not domestic housing. So it's those sort of lower-level business properties that we can take advantage of. And it's been a bit of a piece of work, and Anish has been very, very diligent in trying to put this all together, but it's been quite a slow process. So I know we're going to hear from our colleagues from libraries who are doing really well on this issue. But we'll come back to that, to how we take this forward. But we'll hear from what you have to say first. But that's the background of what this one's all about.
Okay, so the paper we provided details the experience and the data that we've gathered in managing venue hire in the library service. We have 7 dedicated meeting rooms and 3 other spaces inside libraries currently available for a range of hire options, which are detailed there. And the areas include Harefield, Ruislip, Hillingdon and Hay, so right across the borough. Just briefly, there are 3 services in my remit. So as well as libraries, there are museums and theatres, and all 3 hire spaces out. But the richest data comes from libraries because we use a system called Booking Plus, which we introduced, was it a year ago? Yeah, we introduced a year ago, and that's how we handle room bookings in libraries. So not only does it help us simplify the way that we do things, it gives us data that is then incredibly useful. But to just briefly fill you in on some of the other venues that hire space out, the Compass Theatre and the Winston Churchill Theatre, in Ickenham and Ruislip respectively, the Battle of Britain Bunker, Eastcote House Gardens, and then venues on Manor Farm sites also hire space to residents and non-residents for commercial, charity and private bookings. They also hire space out to internal customers, in particular the music service, who hire rooms at the Compass and Manor Farm for music lessons and exams. But the focus, as I say, is on the paper is on libraries, and what we're hoping is that some of the learning we've got can be extrapolated into how we might steer future development for a larger offer across the council, as well as developing the library service model specifically. I'm not going to read the paper out, but there were 6 recommendations on the paper, and I'm touching on a few of those where I think it might be helpful to provide greater context. The first was to note the progress made with the library service booking system. So Booking Plus was purchased following a winning funding bid made to the British Library's Library On project, and we discussed with the Digital and Intelligence team whether something bespoke was in the pipeline internally or whether it was better for us to go this way. We went this way, and Booking Plus is a system that is used in several authorities, and so they already had some data to prove its worth. And it's something that we use to manage bookings of our library meeting rooms. It reduces transactional work for library staff and managers. It simplifies payments, and it allows potential hirers to see if a room is suitable without having to come in person, make an appointment, tie up staff time or their time. Kojima, the provider of Booking Plus, have never worked with a local authority to use one system across a range of different services, but they are interested in exploring that if that was a direction that we so chose to take. And we have had an initial conversation about possibly using it in museums and theatres. The 4th recommendation was to explore tiered pricing structures which could be used to support new initiatives, for example, supporting small businesses operated by a resident to help get it off the ground. Using synergies in different council departments, Chamber of Commerce and other departments means that libraries and other council venues could be offered as part of the partnership work between the council and third sector organisations. which would be beneficial to the authority, the charity and to the residents. A good example of that is since we submitted this report, Age UK approached Ruislip Manor Library about hiring a space, having been pointed in that direction by Santander. We also think there's potential to consider pricing at different times of day, so like a peak or off-peak, identifying periods of greater and lesser demand rather than a flat rate across all of our venues and all of our times. The last recommendation was to look deeper into the data so that we can be sure what we offer now and can offer in the future has an audience. There are some areas of the borough where a library meeting room is one of several options alongside, for example, a church hall or a community centre. In other locations, the library may be the only option for a hireable space, in which case it would make sense to prioritise investment in the latter and make sure those spaces were equipped, accessed outside of library opening hours, because as you'll see in the report, some of our venues are available outside of opening hours, some can only be accessed inside of opening hours, and ensuring that it's equipped for a variety of usage. Future development of libraries can include provision of meeting spaces if we know that's going to be in demand. And a final observation is that, for example, we're expecting that the forthcoming meeting rooms at Uxbridge Library will be very popular due to the queries we've had so far. So we hope the paper proves useful in that wider consideration and the work that you've started to do. And if you did have any questions, we'd be happy to try and answer them.
All right, that's great. And as ever, when you put your head above the parapet, you're likely to have someone pick on you, because it seems to me that our plan, in terms of a sort of two-phased, well, probably more than two, but two for the minute, way of looking at it would vest much more easily with you guys. Because originally what we were thinking of was to draw together all of the different departments that have properties in their portfolios, leaving aside the piece of work we want to be done, and we're not taking no for an answer, of an asset register, so that we and cabinet members know what they've got in their portfolios. And it should be a fairly simple task, we hope, to be able to say, right, we know this lot, the libraries, the theatres, this, that and the other. We know the things that we know, but what do we not know? Is there, I might be wrong about this, but I think I'm right, is there property that we're not aware of, that's just been sitting around doing nothing for goodness knows how long? And if there is, what are we going to do with it? And those three options, hopeless, could be saved, doing quite well. So that's a separate, but we definitely want that done, and we've been asking for that for ages. And what we will do later on this evening is to ask Anisha to do an interim report to Cabinet, essentially saying to Cabinet members, if you have property in your portfolio, demand an asset register now, so that we can then carry on with this. Because it's all very well you guys doing a really good job, but if there's a whole load of money's worth property out there doing nothing, it's ridiculous from a business point of view. And if we can, and if the top stuff is being commercialised, which is great, is it being commercialised enough? If the middle stuff needs not very much money spending on it to be able to make it viable, let's do that. And if the rubbish stuff can be sold, at least we've made some money out of it. So that's kind of like the way we've looked at it. But it sounds now the question, I suppose my question first of all is, your booking system, would that, in your discussions with the company, will that be able to be adapted for the piece, for the whole thing?
At the moment, I think that they will need to do some work on it, but they have definitely indicated a desire to do that, because Hillingdon will be really a first for them. So, in fact, as well, the way that the system works with a fee for the use based on the income that you generate through the platform, they have actually offer a reduction on it depending on the levels. So I know that they are really keen. There will be some adaptation that needs to be done, because the key thing will be to have a similar pricing structure across those assets. But depending on what is required, we could have some conversations with them.
All right, where we want to get to, and our vision is this, that, and I'll tell you exactly where it came from. when we first raised this, some time ago, not a friend, but a person I know came to see me, and he was I think he was a chiropractor, and he said, look, I need to move out of the room I've got. What I need is really just a room. I bring my table, I bring all my stuff, but I'd like a sink and maybe a loo, and it needs to be secure so I can hire it. And it was a real difficult job to find somewhere like that, and it should have been easy. And we would like us to be the go-to hiring for our residents, whether it's a small business, whether it's a birthday party, whether it's a long-term let of some description, whatever it is, because we've got the places, haven't we? But I think we've got the rooms. We just don't have a system that's well enough flexible and able to make the offer at this stage.
I think you're right. I was speaking to a colleague the other day who was working from a space in Streatham, which was a hireable office space. She worked in Hillingdon, lived in Streatham. It was it was easy for her to go to that space and work there. I know other authorities, their library services have a thing called workeries, so just an office hub that you can go in and use, or a booth that you can go in to have meetings or attend interviews or whatever it might be. So there are really good models out there across London that we can learn from. In terms of spaces, I mean, as I say, I've got venues in Manor Farm, Eastcote House Gardens, the theatres and the libraries. I'm sure there are vacant possessions or even council spaces from other services who maybe aren't utilising those spaces as well as they could. I think for us it's because we had an income target. We had an income target to make some income on room hire, and so we've utilised that to the best of our ability. And I think sometimes it's you need the tail to wag the dog. You need the need to find out what's possible, I think.
But also, if you've got the offer, it's a bit like, if you build it, they will come type of thing. If you've got the offer there, then and you promote it, that's the other thing, of course. But you're right about the office thing. I mean, again, because I work all over the shop, you can go to certain authorities, ring them up, and or whatever, go on their website, and they've got a whole bunch of little offices or whatever, and you may only want it for a couple of hours.
Yeah.
But Hillingdon is geographically in such a good spot because you've got people coming in who don't want to rent a room in town, which costs a fortune, but they could rent a room from us, which is half a fortune, let's say, and maybe people coming out from town. Because we're cheaper than being in town, but yet you can get into town in half an hour, or whatever it is, or 3 days on the Met Line. But there's lots of opportunities here, but we just need to alight on someone or a department to draw the others together. Because if we just spin it across the piece, we'll never get there. So if we were to recommend that a starting point would be you guys, so that other departments said to you, okay, look, we've got space to stick onto your register of space. Would that cause you a problem?
Only in terms of capacity and scale, I think, because you say we don't know what's out there, we don't know how flooded with information we're going to be. And then, as Carlos alluded to, it's then trying to standardise something across quite a large network. In terms of the offer, in terms of how we advertise it, in terms of how we price it, and that was even a sticking point with what we did know with museums and theatres, trying to make sure that we could all agree on a sort of on rates across the piece that, I guess, reduce confusion or competition between different services for that business.
All right. Well, I think that's the direction of travel. I know what we don't want, and we don't need to spend a whole hulu of money on consultants to tell us what we've just said, because essentially we've already worked out what we want to do, and we do know that we have big backing of the cabinet on this because they're keen on doing it. So if we do if Anisha does our interim report, I always say we, and Anisha ends up doing it. If we do an initial report to cabinet highlighting those maybe 2 or 3 requests from us that they then endorse and crack on with, and we centre this project on you guys. And if it starts to get too big, then our thoughts previously were, well, all right, we can, if we know we're going to be making a certain amount of money across the board in relation to not only the knowns but the current uses of property, then maybe we can, appoint someone to be the focal point of it, but sitting in your directorate or in your area, because you've already got the experience and you're already working with the company, and so it's a good kind of burgeoning point, which is what you've got. So that makes a lot more sense. All right, that's good. Questions, Councillor Bennett?
Thank you, Chair. No, it was just to say, I guess you guys have been the proof of concept and have shown that this can be viable. That, even though there's, was it 16%, I think, of available time is taken up, but to still get to the point where over £90,000 in revenue a year shows that the principle works. And if you can scale this to other assets, be that within your remit or somebody else's, and it would need more investment, that the theory of if you build it, they will come works, and that there are customers who will pay for this type of thing.
I mean, yeah, I think that's true, and as you've seen, we've been very lucky. For example, Barclays have approached us and based themselves in 2 of our libraries due to banks closing in the high street, and they've taken that, and that's been very successful. Particularly in Ruislip Manor. We work with other council departments, and that's a mixture of paid hire and free hire, if that helps them to reach different parts of the community. I mean, the meeting rooms are also used by ourselves for our activities, and that may depress the amount of time that those rooms are available. But we have more and more recently been prioritising that income generating potential, so we don't turn away the potential for income generation. Was there anything to add on that?
I mean, I will only add that it will be useful as well to understand what kind of demand is out there, because it's all very well for us to invest on the spaces, but then in some areas there might already be 3 or 4 others that do the same thing and offer the same space for a much cheaper price. So I'm thinking, for example, of Hillingdon. There are plenty of halls, there are plenty of churches that offer higher space. The library only has a small room. So frankly, I'm not quite sure that there will be much of a business case to, for example, invest to allow access outside library opening hours. So I think that's something that we pointed as well on the report that will be useful to engage with, say, for example, the Hillingdon Chamber of Commerce, with sort of the departments in the council that are working with the third sector to understand what requirements they have, what kind of spaces do they need, and where, because the needs in the north of the borough are different to the needs in the south. So if you were to put, say, some offices, I don't know, there might be certain areas in the south where there might not be that demand, or maybe that's the place to put it, but how do we know that that's where there will be the place to have them? So that's one of the recommendations as well, that we do a little bit of research to understand where the need is and what is the demand.
So I'd say it's a really good point. So at our last meeting, I think it was, we had Fiona, who is fantastic, who I work with a lot at the Battle of Britain Bunker Visitor Centre, but that was one of the questions I tabled to her was, I'm a trustee of a charity where we have a hall that we rent out, and there is a threshold beyond which it's just not worth it, because the cost that you have to incur in managing the booking, dealing with cancellations, taking payment, doing refunds, refunding deposits, cleaning it, all of that type of thing, is that there is we don't want to make this an enterprise in the sense of we don't want to spend money making this our bread and butter. Rather, it's around where we have assets and where we've got the space, and it's not going to increase costs because it's within library opening hours, etc. How can we make more money effectively? I think that's quite a good point to get across in the interim report, that it's it's where it makes sense and where it's profitable and where we're using existing space, rather than opening libraries up all night and having raves or parties or whatever might want to be done in there.
Before I call on Councillor Jupiter, that's right, but equally, and again, this is a reason why we must have this asset register. If we do discover, and everything that we've been told suggests that we might, that there are properties that have been sitting around doing nothing for ages, and we're able to capitalise those, and then we're able to turn around and say, well, look, the money that we've made from that, we can kind of be able to help with putting into this general scheme, and make the overall scheme more profitable. I mean, inevitably, if we are going to hire rooms or we're going to hire halls, there will be an element, won't there, of, well, who's got the key? Who's going to open it? Does anybody need to be there while the whole thing's going on, or does someone come in and go away again and come back, or whatever? And it would be a shame not to be able to use those types of buildings for income stream, but for not a very huge amount of investment, which could be cost neutral by virtue of selling off stuff that we don't need. So it's not quite chicken and egg, because I think we do need to have that asset register, identify those properties, deal with them quickly, the bad ones, and then see where we are. But at the same time, keep going with the stuff you're doing. All right, Councillor Chubara.
Thank you, Chairman. My question is about the system itself, and how do you actually port the data generated in the system into our other in-house systems like accounting and other systems which you may need to put that data in?
Well, at the moment, there isn't anything of the sort done. So what is being done for this report, we've run some reports directly from the platform, and then they've been uploaded onto Power BI to generate some dashboard and analyze data. Obviously, if we are looking at integrating it with other data from the systems, that we'll have to do a bit more of exploration on there. But in terms of the income, what happens is every month they will send a report. We'll need to submit an entry on the council's finance system, Capita, and that's all that it will take to reconcile the payment. So that data is then as well on the council finance system.
Am I correct to assume that is done manually?
The only thing done manually is for income control. When they receive the payment, they receive the deposit on the bank account, then they need actually the e-return forms to tell them, right, how do we split this money, where does it need to go? That's it.
Thank you.
All right, Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Chair. I do appreciate I'm coming to this sort of mid-discussion, but one of the things which, Chair, you've mentioned quite rightly again is the register. I think that's extremely important, that we need that register ASAP, and I think reading from the previous minutes as well that was mentioned. So that is definitely something I think needs to happen with lightning speed. I've just got a few points which may have been discussed prior, so apologies if they have been. One is to do with the library hire income. Me reading on here that we've got a target of just shy of 100k, and they're generating about 49 to 55. That's not including the Barclays deal. Just wanted to make an observation that it's a point to keep in mind that we're not overly relying on just one-off sort of corporate partners, and we're looking to build something that's more sustainable across the board. And secondly, a little bit about maybe transparency. Are we going to look into a tiered pricing system? I know this question is probably a bit far-fetched if we don't know what we've got at the moment yet, but for sort of community groups versus commercial interests, is that something that we could also consider? Thank you.
We've talked about that. We've talked about a range of issues. For example, community groups that might have had their own place, but now that's not available, or they've had to get rid of it, or not had to even, but just wanted to get rid of it, and therefore want to be a bit more peripatetic. And so, do we look at a pricing structure that is a sort of has a sort of slightly social aspect to it, as opposed to it all being commercial? But again, I think that is something that we can look at, but I get the feeling that that's something that we would look at more further down the line when we've got a much better idea about where we are. If there are individual groups that, for example, have always rented a particular place, and that particular place is within this scope, then it may be that for an entirely, private function, or maybe even a commercial function, we charge one rate for that property, and for the weekly meeting of the whatever it is, we charge another.
Just to comment on that, we already have a dire pricing structure. So we have a resident rate and a non-resident rate, and within each one of those we have a commercial and non-commercial. So the price that, say, local society meeting in the library pay is different to a tuition group operating in the space. So that's already in place. And you're absolutely right. We've made the same point with regards to the commercial agreements. While they provide a reliable income, I think that it can pose a challenge because they can withdraw as easily, as they are put in place, and but it would be good just to have a variety, not to be over-reliant on a big contract as Barclays is.
All right. Well, look, we know. I know two of you haven't, but I think you get the gist of what's been going on. I mean, we've talked about this a lot. We know what we want, and it's taken far too long for the main thing that we want to take place. So that's why we've decided to go down this interim report route, and then to push it along quite a lot. But what you've said has been really, really helpful, and I do think that really it's got initially, at least, it's got to be vested in your area, because you've already got the experience, and also have ironed out some of the wrinkles from the past, which is great. But we cannot help but think that this is a good thing to do, and to get a much better grip on it. And it's been fallow for some long time, I think. So we need to really give it a nice shake-up. All right, unless there's any other questions, I'll close this one. All right, thank you very much indeed. Really helpful, thank you. Okay, item 7, which we've been talking about a bit behind the scenes, but I will let Anisha talk to you about, which is financial scrutiny training.
Thank you, Chair. I emailed members a few days ago regarding finance training, which has been arranged. This has been put in the diary for the 10th of September, and I'd encourage you to attend. And it will focus on finance training for select committees. It's going to be provided by a third-party provider, and it will take place in person. Thank you.
Oh, loads of hands. Councillor Jupiter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it just going to be one session, or are you going to do more than one session for the people who can't make the first, the date which you have proposed?
At present, it's only going to be this one session. However, we'll see how it goes, and maybe there might be future sessions. But at the moment, there is only one in the diary.
Thank you.
I can help with that. Councillor Banerjee.
Thank you, Chairman. Is it just for our committee, or has it been opened up to all members?
It's been opened up to all non-scrutiny. Yeah, it's been opened up to all members.
Yeah, that's right. So the original idea was for this committee plus chairman and vice chairman of the other committees, but we had to start somewhere. So, and I think in some ways we might have, for that particular cohort, we might have started a bit further on than where we are, which is fine, because it never hurts to go back and have a look at a good starting point. To answer Councillor Jupiter's question, certainly my hope would be that there would be more than just this one, but this would be a good taster, because there is a lot of training out there. The LGA do it, CFPS, I'm not sure they call it anymore, but anyway, whatever the CFPS was, originally they do it. There's lots of different local authority finance training options in the market. So let's see how this one goes. We could repeat it for people who can't make it. We want to emphasise we think it's a good thing for people to do. Whatever position they're in, because who knows, in terms of members may end up on a committee that's got scrutiny responsibility of finance, so it's as well to know, or they may end up on this committee. Councillor Banerjee.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up on that, can it be recorded? Because sometimes, and I've been on other committees, pensions is one, we're going to use terminology acronyms which people may understand in the meeting, then they go away on holiday and they come back and they're like, what does X, Y, Z mean, stuff like that. So there's something to go back to. It's just an idea really more than anything else.
That's a really good idea. I think not only recording it for I was going to say rehearsal, that's not the right word, for revision, but also we could find out whether the people who are providing the training would be willing to let us record it and give access to those who can't attend, so that they can see it later. And I know in the day job we do that a lot for professional training, and people pay, not very much, to be able to log in and watch it, and then you get points. I mean, I'd go as far as to have a professional training point system, but anyway, there we are. Little steps at a time. So that's a good idea, and also if there are any goodness forbid papers at the meeting, sort of handouts and stuff like that, whether we can reproduce those for others who can't be there. But my plan would, and we've talked about this, would be to have something like this fairly regularly, and also to have an incremental side to it, so that we start off with whatever this is, and then if there's a sort of next stage up type of thing, and also sessions on very specific issues. So it may be that the financial scrutiny of one of our colleague committees is slightly different from what we do, because ours is very all-encompassing. And so we have something that's very specific in relation to that area. So I'd really like to try and begin and build in a culture of training in relation to this topic. Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Mann? Sorry, I thought you had your hand. No, just resting your arm, that's all right. All right, good. Forward plan is item 8. I don't think there's an awful lot we need to discuss other than to note that. But if there are any particular issues on the forward plan, if you want me to raise those with any particular cabinet member or the leader, I will. So perhaps if you could email me outside of the meeting, we can do that. But it's as well for us to keep a track of the items that do come up on the forward plan, and anything that you do have, unless you want to raise it now. Yes, Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Chair. It was just I suppose maybe particularly as it aligns with our project work, is the corporate disposals programme. So it's just maybe this committee just having a brief update a couple of times a year, maybe, around just summarising kind of the assets that we've identified where there isn't, to your point that you've said, there isn't a viable future for in terms of rental income or whatever that we're disposing of, just so that we kind of have transparency that is being done.
No, good idea. I mean, going back to something that we did talk about at a previous meeting, we looked at garage rentals. And we all know from walking around our wards that there are some garage blocks which, quite frankly, should have been condemned 20 years ago, let alone now, and could be used for something else. And whether that means that we flatten them and get them ready for planning, and get planning permission ourselves and sell them on, I don't know. But I mean, it's an easy hit, that one. Or whether or not we hand them over to a rental company, or we keep them ourselves and rent them ourselves, or sell them, or whatever. But there are certain buildings that should be able to be dealt with fairly easily and swiftly. Others maybe not quite so. But that's a very good idea. I think we should look at that, and if we can keep a note on that, would be a good idea. Any other observations on the forward plan? No? All right. Thank you very much. Good. Work programme. Manisha.
Following the last meeting, I can confirm that officers will be able to attend the Select Committee meeting in November to provide an update on council tax banding, as requested at the last meeting.
Okay, again, it was something that we asked them to look into, and apparently I'm told there may be some interesting and good news on that, so that'll be quite exciting. But otherwise, we've got a meeting. Do we have a meeting in August? No, September. Oh no, we're on holiday in August. September, we've got our next meeting. So what have we got then lined up? I think we've got transformation or something. Or coming back. There's probably the papers at the back.
Chair, if I so while Nisha finds that, if it's okay, just because I was going to ask a question on that, because there's quite a few different things in for September. There was one around, so we've got the annual complaints and service charge update report.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So in September we have the annual complaints and service update report, and then we will also hear about right to buybacks from Gary Pentecost's team. And then also we are expecting to receive an update report on budget and spending.
Okay, so there's quite a bit there. And again, we can talk offline if anybody wants anything else put in there. But and hopefully we'll have some answers in relation to our interim report as well. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Chair. And it was just to say the other thing that was earmarked in September was a site visit potentially to the Platinum Jubilee Leisure Centre. Is that still on?
We need a date for that.
Do we need a swimming costume? Or is
not unless it's raining. I think the best thing to do is if everybody could put dates to avoid into Anisha, I mean, we could try and do it in August, which probably would be easier, because at least we know there's not many beatings going on. And see if we can do it then, or possibly aim for early September. But yeah, that's definitely something that that we did want to do and have a look at. So we'll if we can all send available dates or dates to avoid into Anisha, then we can plot a date for that. And I'm not sure if the pool will be ready by then, but we'll have to see. All right. Any other comments, observations, anything else? Okay. Thank you very much. I shall close the meeting. Thank you.